have changed. One of the most recent additions was is bosque monitors or savanna monitors. We've added them. We got approached by a renowned field herpetologist called Daniel Bennett. He wrote the Chimera edition monitor lizards book. He came in and he said, I'm really struggling because the ecology of the monitor is far more complex than we originally thought. Chaz, we're really struggling. Like the ecology is really rough for them over there. They go through this estivation process. They're dropped down to like 7 or 8% body fat. They look like bags of bones. When they're in this skinny phase, the males become arboreal and climbing up in trees, which is all behaviors that make no sense to people who have these bloated, obese, nasty masses that they all keep in their vivarium. Explaining why we have an animal in a box is an issue, you know? Yes. So then when you have a 15-foot snake in a 6-foot vivarium, you are not presenting the good side of this hobby. You're presenting everything that is wrong with the hobby. People don't realize that just simple names, Leucomelas, black and white. So that the reason for that is so Dendrobates leucomelas, the bumblebee dart frog, was preserved, and it was a preserved specimen that was named. And because the preservation process had bleached it, it had turned it
Welcome
white.
To episode number 87 of the Animals at Home podcast. My name is Dyllon Perrin. Thank you so much for tuning in today. If you're looking for more information on the podcast, make sure you head to animalsathomenetwork.com. If you are interested in supporting the podcast on Patreon, head to patreon.com/animalsathome. There you'll have access to early episodes as well as the option to submit questions to upcoming guests. We do have a fantastic little community building up over there. I think we're at about 36 members, and I do thank every single one of you for signing up for the Patreon account. It really does help me a lot, help me pay for the show, help support the production of the show, which goes a really, really long way. So thank you so much for that. Thank you to our sponsor, CustomReptileHabitats.com. If you're looking for a new enclosure, some of the best enclosures on the market, make sure you head to CustomReptileHabitats.com. There is an affiliate link in the YouTube description as well as at the show notes at AnimalsAtHomeNetwork.com. If you click on that affiliate link and do make a purchase, a small commission does come back to me at no extra cost to you. So if you are in the market for a new enclosure and want to simultaneously support the show, that is one way you can do that. All right, let's jump into today's episode. So today I'm speaking with Chaz Thompson, aka Chaz of Snakes and Adders. I'm sure you've seen the Snakes and Adders YouTube channel. If you haven't, you must go check it out because Chaz has some incredible content on there. Everything from learning how to pronounce Latin names to snake anatomy to breaking down intermediate, beginner, and advanced snake species with just very, very in-depth care guides. I wouldn't even call them care guides, just sort of ecology of species. And he goes into more detail than I see almost anyone do on YouTube. Chaz is a wealth of information. He's been doing this for a long time. Snakes and Adders, the reptile shop in the UK, has a reputation of being one of the best shops out there. He has incredible animal suppliers. The staff that he has, including himself, really understand that it is about the animal first and the customer second. We're making sure that the animals are being sold to somebody who's actually going to care for them in a way that promotes good welfare. So in the episode, Chaz breaks down sort of in general the ethics and the philosophy that allow him to run the store, especially his focus on young customers, meaning the kids coming in who are buying their first leopard gecko or their first corn snake or first reptile. He walks us through how he gets those kids, excited about caring for the animal, but also how he gives them the responsibility of caring for the animal. It's not about, making sure mom and dad know how to buy crickets. He really does put all of the responsibility in the hands of the child, which I think he is really creating the next generation of mindful and conscientious reptile keepers. And I hope if there are any other shop owners out there who are listening to this or shop workers or employees, that you take some of the advice that Chaz is laying out in this episode and implement it in your store if you're not already doing something similar, because I think it really is a home run. Chaz talks about the difference between running a reptile-related business and comparing it to someone who's just interacting with the reptile trade as a hobbyist level, how those two things interplay with each other and where they disagree and where they can agree. We talk about the species that Chaz has on a do not sell list. So Chaz actually has a list of species that he refuses to carry and sell in the store. I'm sure you can imagine what a few of those are off the top of your head. So he tells us what species there are on that list and why they're there. And then we just talk about, in general, advancing the hobby, moving forward. What are things going to look like in the future? And you know what? Let's just let the conversation roll. It was a fantastic conversation. It was a pleasure chatting with Chaz. I know you will all enjoy it. Here's my conversation with Chaz. I will talk to you after. Chaz, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for doing this.
Oh, thank you for having me. Thanks, man.
Really looking forward to chatting with you. I think, you have this presence online that you sort of have this very no BS attitude, and I think people respect that, and people really go to you for truthful and authentic advice. And you're constantly posting on YouTube, and so I think we're going to get into all that, because I definitely want to talk about that more. But before we do, can you let us know how all of this started? What got you into reptiles initially?
It was accidental. I went around to a friend's house to a play date, I suppose you'd call it, back in the day. I was 10 years old. My mate Duncan, he'd got a Western hognose. And I thought, whoa, that's interesting. And I had a proper look at it, and I just couldn't believe that I had an actual live snake. I can remember it as if it was yesterday. It's mad. It's 30 years ago, and it's as if it just happened. And the way it felt, the rough scales, the oranges and blacks on its belly, everything about it, I fell in love with it immediately. And then promptly started begging my mum and dad for a snake of my own. That was pretty much the way it worked.
Were they keen on that, or were they not huge fans?
I think initially it was shock, but my mum suffers with anaphylaxis, so she can't go near rodents. She used to have to carry an EpiPen. So whether it was hamsters, guinea pigs, rabbits, she reacted to it all. So for pets, we were pretty limited. My mum and dad worked full time, so a dog or cat wasn't appropriate. So actually, finding reptiles was a godsend, because it's very difficult to be allergic to them unless you're allergic to your own fingernails and hair. So,
yes, which would be a disaster.
Yeah.
So then what did you start keeping initially when you were a kid?
My first snake was a broad-banded water snake, so one of the Nerodias, and then the second snake I kept was a grey rat snake. She was the love of my life. She was called McCartney. I thought she was fabulous. And then I had a diamondback water snake, Nerodia rhombifera, and then the final one was a spotted python, so Antaresia maculosa. So, yeah, they were the initial ones.
And so, what do you think? Why the passion for reptiles? What do you think that comes from, or what about them is so attractive?
That's a difficult one. I just like a spark goes off, and I saw the first time I saw that Western hognose, something changed, and I was just like, this is amazing. I couldn't believe it, how intricate they were, how ornate they were, the way they behaved, the way that they interacted with their immediate environment, and I was at ease around them. I wasn't scared of them, and I don't know, they're just fabulous things, really nice. Like I can't describe it apart from just love at first sight. That's probably the best way to put it.
So then, as you start keeping, you have those 4 animals like you talked about. Did you have a career path in mind? Did you want to pursue working with animals in some way? Obviously, you do now. Was that part of the package, or how did that get folded in?
So no, I went to university. I was doing a product design degree, and I was pretty much 2/3 of the way through that, and then I got offered the opportunity to buy a shop that I worked at weekends. My mum and dad knew it was futile to try and talk me out of it, because they kind of knew that was what I was destined to do, and wonderfully, because for them they said, yes, okay, we'll support you, we'll offer you financial help, and we'll help you buy this shop. I bought Snakes and Adders in 2003. So.
Okay. Interesting. So before you did that, because when I listen to you speak, especially when you have these amazing informative videos on YouTube, clearly you have sort of like Francis in a way. We were talking about Francis before, Koskiri. You're like an encyclopedia in the head. You just you know all the Latin names and everything to know about these animals. Were you already doing that before working at the shop? Like, was that part of just
I used to get my mum to test me on the Latin names.
Just for fun?
Yeah, I'm such a nerd. Honestly, but I had a little Collins Gem Snakes Guide book, and I would force my mum to sit in the chair, and she'd go, I don't know, Burmese python, and I'd be like, Python malaris bivitatus, as it was at the time anyway. Now it's Python bivitatus. Before people have a go at me for getting the wrong Latin name,
Yeah.
They've been reclassified so many times. So we used to do that and go through them all. And I suppose at one point I'd probably had about 1,000 of them up there somewhere. I've forgotten them all now, but I used to be a nerd like you wouldn't believe. So
Well, I do believe it because when I hear you speak, I can hear that come out, and it's there are a lot of people who I think try in herpetoculture try and pretend like they know a lot about it, and for me, I try to stay away from that as much as possible. Like I'm just learning, asking questions, but as far someone like you, it's not like you're trying to prove anything. It's just when you speak, I can tell that there's a deep sense of knowledge there. There's a foundation. It's not like you just went to Google and tried to like rattle off an article or remember it and then go to your video and quickly, talk or, spout it off. It's there. There's a foundation.
I use online tools to help me research the videos.
Of course,
I'm not going to say that I don't, you want to make sure that you're correct. People are always wanting to pull you down. So you've got to make sure that you're on it. And you don't want no valid video maker wants to give erroneous advice. So you've got to make sure the localities and things and distribution are right. But yeah, I've spent a pretty much a lifetime reading and learning about them. And then because of the exposure to the shop I had a collection of approaching probably 80 to 100 animals at my home prior to taking the shop, and that ran the gambit from oriental fire-bellied toads up to reticulated pythons and amethystine pythons. So I had a really wide ranging taste, and then going into the shop at 20 years old, having to learn on your feet, work with a bunch of species you've not worked with before, cocking up with a load of species that you've not worked with before, because in truth that's where you learn. You're not learning if everything goes right all the time. What are you learning? Exactly. The cock-ups and the mistakes are where you actually learn your trade. And I've made enough cock-ups now to be comfortable telling people and advising people based on real world experience rather than theory written in a book. So I can bring the book part, which was my nerd element, in, and then my real world experience as well.
So as far as snakes and adders go, I see on the sign behind you, established in 2000, and then you bought it in 2003.
Yeah.
So it wasn't actually around for that long before it came up for sale for you to buy. So what's the story there?
The dude run it into the ground, pretty much.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
He wasn't. It wasn't a particularly scrupulous fella. It wasn't being run particularly well, and I had the opportunity to take it on, and immediately found myself on the back foot. I had people coming in with tortoises that have been given a 2% tube, all this sort of stuff, and you think, oh shit, like, what have I taken on? And so for the first year, it was putting out fires and trying to solve problems. And again, that's the learning curve that you put on. And at 23, which is what I was when I took the shop, it was a pretty steep learning curve. It was a shock to the system to be responsible for it all. Yeah, so I didn't get it right a lot of the time to begin with. A lot of mistakes were made.
I can imagine that first couple of years must have been horribly stressful. Like, did you even sleep during that time?
Well, I made a lot of mistakes. I spent money on what I shouldn't have spent it on. I had the mentality of a hobbyist. The first key to ruining a reptile business, which is what I am, and I'm not ashamed to admit it, is being a hobbyist. You can't do both. They can work together, same way that me and Francis can work together. We can talk. All we do is talk, as you can imagine, because Francis is a talker. All we do is rabbit on all day, and there's loads for us to talk about. But his perspective and my perspective will always be different, because I'm in a professional capacity dealing with the public. He's in the private sector, keeping at home, and knows the way that he wants to keep. And I think that's probably one of the biggest disconnects with the UK hobby. I don't know what it's like in Canada, but we have a body representing us that then represents wholesalers, shops, and hobbyists. Doesn't work. Just doesn't work.
It's just too many stakeholders under one roof. What the
wholesalers want to what the shops want to what the hobbyist wants are just totally different planets, never mind areas,
Right.
So as soon as you start saying things such as for Francis with and Daryl at Advancing Herpetological Husbandry, and the things that they want to see implemented, which are completely rational, they are researched, everything else, they won't necessarily get implemented because it would stifle the trade. If you stifle the trade, then you affect profit margin. If you affect profit margin, then we can't do it. So they get stymied at every opportunity, and it gets stopped. And this is an ongoing issue, which I don't see getting resolved anytime soon. You know,
it is a very interesting issue for sure. Like, we do always want to see progression on all three of those, like the wholesale, the business, and the hobby, of course. But I think like you're hitting the nail on the head, and they are always going to have slightly different practices. So what are some of the main things that you see that are different from a hobbyist to a business, for example? We'll leave the wholesales out of it, but
so the conversation that I've had repeatedly with Francis when we've been having that robust debates has been that the hobby is like a container ship. We can only turn at a certain pace and move at a certain pace, whether that be because we're waiting for the filter down of the research that Francis Baines and Roman Murren and all these other people are doing actually starts to filter into the ground soil, which is people coming up and wanting to start researching. Until that starts to happen, the shop's going, you've got to have this, you can't use that, you must use this. Well, I've been online and I've seen so-and-so's care sheet. It says nothing about this.
Yeah.
Why do I need UV for a leopard gecko, or why do I need this, that, and the other? And so you're fighting a losing battle immediately. And there comes a point where, yes, there are ethics, yes, you're profit making, but you're trying to walk the line that there's only so quick you can turn. As a private hobbyist, you can literally spin on your heels 180 degrees and go, right, I'm doing this completely differently now.
Yeah.
P5s, halogens, this light, LEDs, multiple basking sites, blah, blah, blah. And I have unlimited wealth and unlimited resources, and I can do X, Y, and Z. Whereas for a shop, 95% of the time, we're dealing with little Billy and little Mandy, 10 years old, who are wanting to buy their first reptile. Mum and dad aren't made of money, nor do they understand the hobby that their kids are getting into. Mm-hmm. We're trying to instill a passion in the kids without, one, breaking the bank, and two, frying their brains.
Yes.
There's only so much that we can do. And therefore, I see change in the hobby, and change for good. And it is work that Francis and Roman and Francis Kaskiri and Daryl and the others are doing with the UVB for Leos and Arcadia and reptile systems, doing the shade dwellers and their other parallels to it, where we can introduce those to those animals that have got highly transmissible skin for UVB, and it's low exposure. So like your 7% shade dweller, and that can go on our croc skinks, on our leopard geckos, fat tail geckos, all this sort of stuff. And that's now part of our official kit. That goes with every animal. And so that is a change. It seems like nothing to some of the advancing elite, but the truth is, it's actually a seismic shift in husbandry terms for the shops to be introducing UVB as standard for this stuff. Yes, people will deride it as small potatoes, but they're the individual, not an industry that's got to sort of turn itself around. And there's a bunch of shops that are trying to work to improve standards. You know, there's Wrigley's down south from here. There's my mate Jordan up at what's it called, Peculiar Pets. So there's a few guys, and they're vocal, and you know, whether they are admins on Facebook groups or whatever else, they're trying to espouse this modern care. But the amount of troglodytes and knuckle draggers that are still in this hobby that refuse to accept that you've got to move forward. It's not 1984 anymore. You don't keep it in a frigging box with a light bulb on it. It just doesn't work. We've got to think of better ways to do stuff. And the people who run the hobby or are in charge of the hobby, they want the status quo. But if you get status quo, you're not going anywhere. You've got to move forward.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to move the shop forward as best as I can within the parameters of being a profit-making business. So there's only so fast I can go, you know?
Exactly, yeah. And I think that's exactly right. And even with the new keepers coming in, that's the same sort of point that I try to make, is it's okay however you start. You know, you get your animal, you set them up very simply, as long as there's an expectation that the progression is going to be there. And as a hobbyist, you plan to improve. That's great. And I know you had made this analogy once on one of your videos, and I think it's a great analogy with the belt system that comes from. Were you judo or what were you?
Brazilian jiu-jitsu.
Oh, jiu-jitsu. Okay. Yeah. So maybe you could run through that, because I think it's just a perfect analogy of why you can't start with the advanced skills that actually would be detrimental.
Okay, so yeah, so my background for martial arts is I got a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu with Gracie Barra, and I used to do the coaching, and we had a belt system: white, blue, purple, brown, black, and the system precluded certain moves or techniques based on the risk to your partner, not necessarily to yourself, what you could do to your partner. So whether that would be wrist locks, whether that was ankle locks, whether it was what we call knee bars, which are all varying locks that increase the severity of potential injury. And we would introduce certain moves at certain belts. And I think that with the hobby, we have to stage the way that beginners ramp up their experience. If you're going to jump straight in with bioactivity, your photo periods, thermal gradients, multiple basking sites, live plants that you need to manage and organize and grow, this is going to fail. We all know it's going to fail. Straight out the bat, nobody is a reptile expert. You're going to cock up. You're going to get bad sheds. You might get cuts. You could get grazes. Your snake might end up with the snuffles. These are things that we've got to work through. Now, if you're trying to juggle and balance 15 plates at once, whereas if I say to you, okay, we're going to have a tank with a thermostat and a heat pad, or a thermostat and a bulb, or a thermostat and a halogen, and this is our single plate, I reckon within a minute you've got that spinning and you've got it down pat, and that guy's just staying up there now. I'm happy with that. But then we're going to go, okay, so now you're going to keep tropical animals, so that's humidity, so there's your second plate. Right, now bioactivity, so that's your third plate and your fourth plate and your fifth plate. And this is where it's a balancing act, and people need to master a certain skill before they can move on to the next skill. And that's why we use hardy animals. That's why you would never keep, I don't know, cat snakes or mangrove snakes as a beginner species, not only for the venom, but because they're so bloody delicate. So you need an animal that's tolerant of cock-ups. The reason corn snakes are kept is they're incredibly tolerant of you getting it wrong. And that's what makes an animal a good pet. If it's hardy, we don't necessarily want to test the limits, but a realist has to know that somebody is going to cock something up somewhere. And we need the opportunity to be able to bring it back from this problem and restore equilibrium to this snake, at which point then that owner has now just learned far more than not doing that cock up in the first place. I know that seems maybe slightly callous or counterintuitive, but it's the mistakes that they learn from, and that's how we're going to do it. So we introduced the basics initially at the point of sale. Every animal must be sold with a thermostat. All lizards as policy and all amphibians as policy are now sold with a UVB system. We're not quite at the snakes yet, but what we're going to do is over the next 15 months, the whole shop's getting refitted. And when it gets done, every one of my vivs is going to have UV. I can't demand that people have UV for snakes if I haven't got it in my own tanks.
Yeah.
So I've got to, but then this is a $20,000 expense. So I need to think about doing it a bit at a time. So I can't quite do that immediately. But those are the basics, the basic fundamentals. I'm giving you photo and thermo, and we're going to control those, and we're going to see how we go. And then if you want to add something more complex, we can at a later date, but we're not doing it yet because you need to cut your teeth on this and work out what you're doing and whether you've got it right.
Yeah, I think that it's just a perfect analogy. And that's why, I coach swimming, and many of the listeners will know that I coach competitive swimming. So I work with athletes who are learning the basic competitive skills, but then all the way up to sort of national team members. And if I could not take the national level skills and bring them down to our minis, it wouldn't. The jiu-jitsu example is even better because of the injuries that could happen from trying to teach those skills. For me, it would be stupid. It would be pointless. It would be like trying to teach a grade 12 math to a kindergarten. You just would get nowhere. But that's why I like the jiu-jitsu example, because they need to learn the skills and have success and make small mistakes that aren't going to kill the animal. And then when they're ready, they can come back. And I'm sure you have a open dialogue with the customers, right? They can come back and learn and advance.
Well, what we've introduced, I mean, predominantly the adults come back to us anyway, but what we're keen to develop is this family feeling for the kids. So we've introduced a certificate system where they get a certificate of ownership. And basically there's a declaration at the top of the certificate: I promise to do the best I can by my reptile and advance my husbandry where I can to make my animal succeed. So this is part of what they're agreeing to. And it's it's one of our main tenants now. Me and the two girls here at the Snakes and Adders, we absolutely love the idea of having these kids. They're the keeper. Mum and dad, shut up. I'm not interested. I'm talking to the kid. You're the bank. That's all. I want to know. I want to know the kid's name. What we're going to call it. You know, have you done your research? Have you done your reading? The questions you want to ask me. I give them the business card and I say, you need to ring me. You ask for Chaz and I'll help you. You know, and I get them these little voices. It's not fed this week. Do you know, like? but that's what I want. I want them to feel that I'm approachable. I might look like a bit like a grizzly bear, but I'm approachable. You can come. You know, it's just a friendly arm around their shoulder, trying to help them in the hobby. And I think that sometimes that's missing. We take the kids for granted. They're far more capable than we realize. And if you give them the skill set, then they're going to be the future. So that I'm trying to give them the best start that you can. And I didn't necessarily get that start. I had a decent start in the hobby, but a lot of it was self-motivated learning rather than anything else. Whereas, you know, I'd like to think that the kids coming in here, hopefully are going to be zookeepers of the future or whatever else, you know?
Well, and that was a conversation I was having with someone the other day, and I think this is what the internet has maybe ruined in some ways, is that idea of mentorship where you're getting that connection with another keeper face to face and you're learning skills together. And I think that's exactly what you're describing here with the young kids. With the internet, yes, we have Facebook groups and that's all good. You can kind of communicate through texting, but it's not the same as being able to sit down with somebody and talk animals in person. And even now with COVID, it's even worse.
Mm-hmm. Well, no, I agree completely. And we will be fostering this kid thing and moving forward. Long term, I think I would like to try and organize a kids club locally, but I'm not at a stage where I can organize that yet. But that's somewhere I would like to be, where we could have some sort of social club, but then there was an educational element to it as well, and we could develop them that way. That's something that I would like to do long term, I think. But yeah, just to try and help them. And then being a mentor is something I take seriously. All of us shop owners have got a responsibility to the kids that we sell to do the very best by them. You know, if you're just seeing them as pounds and pence or dollars and cents, whatever, you know, that then it's never going to succeed. You've got to invest in the kids. The passion's there. They're in each week. They're telling you about how their animal's doing. We give them a record sheet, which we make them write down the shed skins and dates, feeds and dates. We want them to weigh it once a month. They can record when they've cleaned it out. At the bottom, it says, if you fill this sheet, we'll give you another one free. Just come in. So it's all about record keeping, trying to get them to be good record keepers, being good pet keepers and be responsible. We give them homework to do. I mean, this all sounds weird, but they do it, you know, like, so you think that, oh, well, I'm not doing that. That's rubbish. That's stupid. Why would I do that? Well, in actual fact, the parents really seem to like the fact that you're making their children take on a responsibility and not shirk it. The homework is, where's your animal from? What temperature does it like to be? Does it like being moist? Does it like being dry? Does it need any special vitamins? All these sorts of questions. And just from doing their little Google research and everything else, they can find out what they need to know and, you know, develop their knowledge. And then I say to them, anything that you can't answer, ring me and ask me, and I'll tell you the answers.
Yeah.
Or bring the sheet in and we can talk about it. So they come in and we have our little conversations and everything else. So I get bought bags of sweets and all sorts of stuff.
Oh, see, that's the good news.
Yeah, that's the good stuff. Bags of lollipops and everything.
Well, and you're so right. When you give a kid a chunk of responsibility, most people think, oh, their kids are not going to want to do it or they don't know. You know what? You give a kid some responsibility, they love that. They are eager about it because it's something that they can control and it's their thing. And the better they do at it, the more excited you're going to be, your parents are going to be. And I think you're exactly right. This idea that we have to, you know, protect kids or only talk to the parents, make sure the parents know what it is just totally wrong. An 8-year-old kid can figure out how to care for a leopard gecko, but they won't if you just sell them it and, you know, hope the parents buy the crickets. Yeah,
or if the kid's only concept of keeping a leopard gecko is, I'm going to get it out 3 times a week to play with it, right, and then that's my responsibility ended, then you've taught them nothing.
Exactly.
You know, like how are they a keeper? They're not a keeper. They've taken on no responsibility. They don't, you know. I said to him, who's responsible for wheeze and poos? Who's cleaning out the wheeze and poos? You know, and it's like, me, I am. You know, I said, you've got to clean out the wheeze and poos. You can't have a gecko without cleaning out the wheeze and poos.
Yeah.
I mean, I sound like such an idiot. You've had all these illustrious guys on, and here I am talking about wheeze and poos.
But I mean, but it's the foundation of the hobby. Like you said, these are the people that are coming up and replacing. And the cool thing is those will be lifetime customers of yours as well. So there is a business side that you can fold into that too, from just the numbers point of view.
You'd be a fool not to recognize that investing in the kids is going to be financially lucrative in the long term.
Yeah,
you're investing in your future. You're safeguarding your future by investing in the kids. Yeah, absolutely right.
So as far as, so when you took over the shop, obviously this is where you are now. You have all these, I love this foundation. You're focusing on the kids, focusing on, certificates of ownership and whatnot. You took over the shop in 2003. You said there was a few years of learning. What other things, what sort of things did you dump from the old owner that you've changed immediately? And, what gave your shop success? I mean, the shop's been around for 2 decades now, which I think is pretty amazing. That's probably way longer than most, I would imagine.
So I think the key was establishing good contacts for animals. And one of my key contacts over the years is Darren Biggs at Crystal Palace Reptiles. I've worked with Darren for pretty much 20 years. He's a wonderful guy, incredibly patient. My shop's been through some rough times, some bad patches. I'm not afraid to admit it because I'm not in those patches anymore. We're in a good place, but in retrospect, we were on our arse at many an occasion, and Darren would always be patient and understanding. And shit, I owe you thousands, mate. I owe you thousands. Like, don't worry about it. Don't worry. And I'll never forget. I will never. Loyal for life. And I'm never going to forget that because that's what helped me. And the fact that I could go down and pick up animals that I couldn't afford helped to then establish the shop on a national level for having that stock in there, which, because you're only as good as your stock list, is the honest answer. So from a shop's perspective, if you only do sort of the basics, you're only ever going to get the basic keepers. If you do the oddball and left field stuff, I'm big in part of why me and Francis Jam is we're banging to colubrids. So weird colubrids, the weirder the better. So I started stocking all the weird Asiatic rat snakes, all the European rat snakes, and that's that was my thing, oddballs. And Darren was more interested in the boas and pythons, but had the ability to bring in the oddballs as well. So I'd always be like, yes, please. Do you know? every time any arrived, they're coming straight up north, and he knew it as well. Shall I even bother unpacking these?
Just send them up.
Yeah. So no. So I think establishing a network of good contacts, good breeders, people you trust, but more than anything, running the shop with integrity and being honest. I think that there's a lot of arseholes in this hobby, and that doesn't stop at shops. There are arsehole shop owners as well, who will take their customers around the corner, take them for every penny that they've got, half the stuff they don't need, or half the stuff that they did need they've not been given. And it's about profit margin, and it's about the sale. And as soon as there's an issue, they don't want to know. So at Snakes and Adders, we try and clean up our own mess. If there's a problem with an animal that we've sold, we rectify it, we solve it. For example, all snakes, when we sell them, we give them 3 meals free. We call them the baseball strikes. If they strike out, we'll refund, exchange, or get it feed in for them. That way they know that they've got a safety net. Unless it's a breeding size royal, at which point we're like, ball python.
Yeah. What's a royal?
I know, yeah. Saying ball python's so wrong. So the royal python, we'll make exceptions if it's a species that's known for sort of estivation or fasting. Right. But for the most part, there's a safety net cast to try and catch people and make sure that they're not going to panic. And I mean, even after that 3-week period, if there's issues, we rectify it. We have animals that come back that are fasting. It's like, we'll get it going again for you, because you've got to look after your customers, look after your crowd. It's not just profit. I try and think of them as family. They're all mates, the people that come in. There obviously has to be a certain amount of distance, because when you get too pally with customers, sometimes they can take the piss because they're there all the time, or do you know what I mean? So
yes, yeah.
But certainly I want them to be welcome and feel that they can approach me if they have an issue, and I will do everything within my power that's reasonable to solve it for them.
Yeah. Well, I think, I mean, that's why it's been around for 21 years or going on 21 years. So it makes sense. And one of the things we were talking about before we started recording was the breeders and the suppliers. And you were saying, how this is going to change now that you guys are a little more insular in the UK. So what are ways, I'll let you answer that as well. And then also, when you're looking for new breeders, or if someone comes to you and says, hey, I'm breeding this species, would you like to buy them? What's your checklist there to make sure you're buying from somebody who you trust?
So that's generally all already taking place. The minute that we heard about Brexit, we immediately set out to establish connections within the UK, recognized the fact that there was going to be issues at borders. So we have got probably a network of around 12 or 15 breeders across the UK who work with various species, who don't necessarily have any interest in working with the public and all of the headaches that brings. So they would prefer to be able to sell to me in one go and just not have the problem.
Yeah.
And that's where we go. And I've got like one of the probably the best partnerships I've had is with a guy called Dave Croppo, who's in Southport on the West Coast. And he produces all sorts of wonderful snakes: dwarf Burmese, Argentine boas, long-tail boas, Russian rat snakes. Well, this is manna from heaven for me, but he doesn't, there has been less shows. He generally does sell at the shows, but he's a realist and knows, okay, I want to work with a trustworthy shop. I sold him some of his breeding stock for his blood pythons and his Burmese years ago, the dwarf Burmese. So he's come back to me and we've developed a really good working relationship, and it's been fruitful for the both of us, because obviously with my profile, the shop's profile, we can sell more than he could. So he'd still be sat on 3/4 of it, whereas we can move it far more effectively, and it goes through the filters of our policies, which is thermostatic control and everything else. So there's a bunch more, and they're, I'm touched because people do come to me and they do offer me stuff, or they reach out because they want their stuff to go through a reputable shop, and it's always nice to hear that. They're just as concerned the opposite way around. Like you were saying, how do you know about the quality control? It's like, well, they're exactly the same when it comes to selling, or at least the decent breeders are, because shops have got a name that's not particularly great. Most places, but the UK definitely, because there's some real jokers out there. And the problem that you get is that they get jaded by seeing stuff being sold with erroneous information and all the rest of it. So I suppose having the YouTube channel, they're my testimonials to, this is what I think of these animals, and there's 200 plus videos now. So it's like, if you want to know how I do things or what I think about things, I pretty much spoke my mind unfiltered on the YouTube channel for a few years.
There's hours up there.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, well, I guess, I never really thought about that as a breeder, how much easier it would be to just sell the offspring to a shop like yours, because like you said, all those filters are in place. You know that you're going to be the face selling the animal and be there to answer questions for customers and new keepers. And I mean, you have to be patient to answer the same question every day. And I'm guessing you guys have probably a list of 40 questions that you answer every single day. And you just have to be as excited to answer it every single day. And I can imagine some breeders are like, I just don't want to deal with that anymore.
Well, there is the messing around element as well. Sometimes not all sales go through, but we're less about the sale and more about the animal or the kid. So like we turn away a good portion of people. So it's with the questions, going back to what you said, because I'm going off on a tangent, with the question regarding repeating yourself. When you're working with kids, actually the joy in their face and the excitement is enough. So what I had at 10 years old with the Western Hognose is what I see every day when the kids walk through the door. So everything I take for granted that has become muscle memory and is here every day, I have to view through the starry eyes of a child. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So and it's easy to do because I'm a big kid, so it's not really a challenge. But part of it is putting yourself down on their level. How amazing this is. That's a real reptile looking back at me through this glass. I can't believe it. You know, like, and that's how excited they are. And, you know,
Yeah.
you have to sort of get hold of, yeah, come on, let's hold it. Let's make sure it's safe. Let's keep them calm. And this is all part and parcel of it. That's the fun bit. The less fun bit is sometimes the people that think that they know more than they do.
Right.
And you then have to get my slightly more assertive head on. Shut up. Let me tell you how to keep this reptile.
Yeah, I can see that side of you. Like,
Yeah.
I think that's sort of the side that I think, not that it's mean or anything, but when we're watching on the YouTube channel, like I said, it's a very no BS sort of attitude, and that's what I think many of us think. I think we'd probably all be surprised to see you with the young kids. I don't think we'd be too surprised to see you sort of grab the scruff of somebody's shirt and throw them out the shop for asking.
Yeah.
So anyway, continue.
Yeah. Well, no, I'm not a overly aggressive person, but I am a forthright person. So
yeah.
Up north, we call it straight John Bull. You say exactly what you think. There's no grey area. If I'm thinking it, I'm saying it. And that's pretty much the way it works. And for the most part, my customers are northern, so they're used to it as well. So the only people that get a shock are the southerners when they come up and they realize, whoa.
Those weak southerners.
Holy moly. That was a bit rough. But, I think we're dealing with live sentient beings. So at which point, I'm not going to fuck about.
Exactly.
You're going to do this properly or not at all.
Yeah.
And you're going to take it seriously or not at all. And if I don't like what you're saying to me, you're not having it. And if that angers you, tough, piss off. Do you know what I mean? That's pretty much my take on it. And I suppose that's what the shop, every bad review we've got, of which we've got some, I'm proud of the ones I've got, because every bad review we've got, either on Facebook or Google, is based on me saying, on your bike, son, you're not having it. So some story has been concocted about how rude and obnoxious I was. No. You wanted to keep a Bosch monitor in a bedroom on a heat pad. You're a twat.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
But you don't even want to get into the dialogue. Let them have their minute of rant and then they're gone. All these
that's not going to work.
Yeah, you're not going to rile me up that way. You can have your little digs. I don't care. Too big.
And I think many people expect when they walk into a shop to just be able to buy what they want. And
Absolutely.
It's sort of a real like mind opener when they're just like, oh, you're not letting me purchase something here?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. But they don't realize that this is a luxury and I'm the gatekeeper and I decide whether you get to have it or not.
Yeah.
So don't come in here with your entitled attitude of I'm buying it and you can't stop me. You ain't buying shit unless I tell you you're buying it. And that's pretty much the way it works. And
exactly.
Literally, and that is the way that this business is run and the way that the business has always been run. We have clearly defined difficulty levels marked on the VIVs. Beginner, intermediate, advanced, which is echoed on the YouTube channel, introducing intermediate and advanced, so that we're grading arbitrarily these animals into sectors. So if you've never kept something before and your opening gambit is it's my first snake, well then no intermediate snake is appropriate for you.
Yeah,
that's
simple.
Before we even go any further, that's it, it's done. So that we can cut the wheat from the chaff immediately. These are the species you can choose from. Everything else off the table. Yeah, but I really want a Burmese. No, you don't.
Yeah,
not
from here, you're not.
Yeah, exactly. So, but the amount of shops that still do it, still sell anything to anyone, is alarming, and that is a problem, a major problem.
Well, I think this is a good chance to talk about the other policy that I find very interesting with your shop is the animals you don't sell. There's a pretty good list of animals that you refuse to carry and sell. So maybe you could just kind of run through that.
Retics, Burmese, Indian rocks, African rocks, dwarf African rocks, amethystine pythons, green anacondas, green iguanas, Bosque monitors, and Nile monitors, off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And those are
turtles as well.
Oh yeah. That's right. Sliders and whatnot.
Yeah.
So can you tell me you don't really have to convince me why those are on your do not sell list, but there's many people who would say, why is that?
Yeah, absolutely. They regularly do say, why is that? And they regularly question me. Not that I care, because it's my shop and I'll do what I want. The point being that retics are farm bred. You only have to look at some of the biggest YouTube channels to see that retics are farm bred. It's ridiculous, retarded.
Yeah.
Animals that reach 20 feet in length immediately cannot be kept by certain people, whether that be space, whether that be the financial constraints of organizing this giant viv. It doesn't matter how many celebrities you parade holding these retics, whatever else you do, you're a moron, and you're producing far more snakes than you bloody should. And there is no place for them to go. There's a finite amount of people that can rehome a giant snake. So if you're saying, well, ball pythons are mass produced, they are mass produced. They're farm bred. They are farm bred. And they're kept in horrendous conditions in rubs and all the rest of it. Yes, absolutely. But do you know what? You could give me 100 ball pythons, and I reckon within a year, I could rehome every one of them, because their requirements are within the realm of 90% of all prospective keepers.
Yeah.
So then to get a 12 or 14 foot retic that some knobhead bought at a show because he thought it was a good idea, or he had a belly full of beer at the bar and went and bought this snake. And now he's been scared of it for the last 9 months because it struck at him once because he waved a rat wrongly in front of its face. And it's been sat for 9 months, becoming more and more feral and not used to being worked with. And then we're presented with a 4 meter long angry snake that we can do nothing with. Who do we give it to? Who wants it? And you can't, it is apples and oranges. The comparison between balls and retics is just it's a farce. People who make the argument are talking out of their ass. You've got snakes that are huge, powerful, specialist predators. And if we're not looking after them, interacting with them and keeping them correctly, they can become very bad news very quickly. So we decided that given the prevalence of retic breeding within the UK, the fact that said moron in America was sending over loads of retics to another said moron in England to then get pushed around the UK with multiple morons breeding more mainland retics, you just think, I don't want any part of that.
Yeah.
I've kept retics. I've kept over 100 retics over the years. But part of being an adult is the ability to change one's mind and not necessarily always be on the same track. So I have changed over the years. I have changed. One of the most recent additions was Bosque monitors or Savannah monitors. We've added them. We got approached by a renowned field herpetologist called Daniel Bennett. He wrote the Chimera edition monitor lizards book. He lives in Glossop. He lived in Glossop. He's died now, unfortunately. But before he passed away, he came into Seals, and he'd come into Seals in Leeds, and we'd had a good meeting then. And he came in and he said, I'm really struggling because the ecology of the monitor is far more complex than we originally thought. Daniel was a field herpetologist of 25 years standing, who lived with the tribes people in Ghana and went out collecting the Savannah monitors. Nobody on this planet, maybe bar one other guy in America whose name I can't even bloody remember, but worked with Daniel, knows more than Daniel. So this guy is the Yoda of Savannah monitors. So not only that, I'm already falling over myself because he is like some demigod of reptile keeping anyway, and was on the ICUN panel for deciding what severity of protection monitor lizards got. That's his credentials.
Wow.
You know, he's a serious dude. Comes in, says, Chaz, we're really struggling. Like the ecology is really rough for them over there. They go through this estivation process. They're dropped down to like 7 or 8% body fat. They look like bags of bones. When they're at this skinny phase, the males become arboreal and climbing up in trees, which is all behaviors that make no sense to people who have these bloated, obese, nasty masses that they all keep in their vivariums.
Yeah.
So you're listening to this, and I'm saying, well, what can we do about it, Dan? He says, well, the problem is we can get them through their first season, but we can never get multiple seasons of eggs out of the bosques. They seem to die of renal failure and kidney problems and all the rest of it. And this estivation process is thought to be the cure. And I said to him, well, I'm not being funny, Daniel, but if somebody lets their monitor drop to 8% body fat and you can visibly see the ribs, they're going to get called out for being cruel. Yeah. So there's a juxtaposition between what happens in the wild and what happens in captivity. But he approached the head of our UK hobby to discuss the problems with the ecology of bosque monitors and was derided as an anti. Oh, you're as bad as them. That's the bullshit that you're dealing with. Do you know what I mean? Like this guy is not just another keeper. He's not just anyone. 25 years field experience with Varanus exanthematicus. The guy knows the species inside and out. And he's coming to you saying, we have made discoveries that have proven my previous text to be totally wrong. He was completely humble, non-arrogant about it, because he's written 2 or 3 books. He wrote a book with a guy called Anidriel Das, which was just on savanna monitors. And some of the care in there, he says, is totally wrong. We got it totally wrong, Chaz. And it's far more complex than we thought. And I said, well, what are we going to do about it? He says, well, I don't know. I approached the head of the hobby and I basically felt like I was a member of PETA. He's an ICUN red list bloody doctor deciding how severe the protection is for certain species of Varanus. It's crazy. And that's because all the wholesalers are mass importing Varanus exanthematicus at this very moment, because it's the season for Ghana to ship out. And there's now going to be a load of Bosch monitors running through every shop in the UK, which in 4 years are going to be fat, bloated messes because every dickhead's decided to feed them mice rather than insects, and they'll all be dead. And this is the horror point of the hobby. We have a good point of the hobby where we've got the kids and the positivity and AHH, but to pretend that the other side, it doesn't exist, is a fallacy. The antis have got a point a lot of the time. If you stop and actually listen to the arguments, actually, shit, that's close to the bone, because that happens a lot. Do you know what I mean? And you've got to. I think any person, to be a proper, well, in my case, a man, I have to admit my mistakes and my cock-ups. I have to hold my hand up and say, yeah, I got that wrong. And we sold bosks, we sold retics, we sold anacondas. We got it wrong. Don't do it anymore. I can't in good conscience continue. I can't apologize or take back what I've already done, but I can try and change for the future. That's all we can do. That's personal development. That's all the hobby needs to do: grow a conscience and develop.
Yeah, you can't attach yourself personally to those ideas. Like you say, you look at the information with the Savannah monitor and you go, wow, there's no way any person can care for this properly. We just have to stop selling it. And that's the only solution you're left with. But if you're attached to the idea of selling people Bosk monitors or working with the importers, you're never going to let that idea go. But it doesn't give us any credibility next to the animal rights groups if we are ideologues and we're just stationing our flags on things that we've been doing for 40 years. So, let's just continue doing that. We need to be dynamic.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things that came up was we had this program in the UK, which was Tiger Kings UK.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up as well.
Yeah. Yeah. It was bad, man. It was bad. The guy that they had on was not a great representative of the hobby, and
can you just give like a 20-second summary of what they were showing on that? Because it was a Tiger King. It was mostly about cats and whatnot, but there was a section about reptiles and just
so in the UK, the Tiger Kings UK, a presenter called Ross Kemp, who's an actor, and he goes around visiting the most dangerous gangs in the world or most dangerous prisons. He's one of these action junkies, but he was in EastEnders of all things as well. So he interviews some guy, Gary, I think he was from the Midlands, no teeth, just literally what you'd expect if you thought, just a council estate, every bedroom rammed to the rafters with retics, big lizards, all this stuff, rubs, shit piled on more shit, and you're just thinking, for fuck's sake, this is our representative. This is national TV. This is Ross Kemp, who's an award-winning journalist for his gangs and whatever else. And this is the best we can do. Yeah. So you've got this guy who's then putting his monitor on a lead and taking it for a walk in a park. They're both wearing puffer jackets. It's not warm enough, Just the amount that is wrong with what's going on in this program. You can't even list in time. I sat with my head like this, and as if I was having pregnancy pains. My wife was rubbing my back, going, "Are you all right, Rolf? Are you all right?" And I'm going, "No, I'm not fucking all right. Look at what he's saying." Oh my God, and you could feel the majority of other British keepers who knew what they were doing just going, "No, and their representative was Dr. So and so from PETA, and we got, I don't know, Bernard off of housing estate in Birmingham. You know, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
So the odds are already stacked against the hobby. And we keep animals in boxes. Tart it up any way you want. We keep animals in boxes. They're not in the wild. And that's a tough sell for Joe Blogs, who doesn't keep reptiles, who doesn't understand what we do or why we do it. Explaining why we have an animal in a box is an issue, you know?
Yes.
So then when you have a 15-foot snake in a 6-foot vivarium, you are not presenting the good side of this hobby. You're presenting everything that is wrong with the hobby. And what you're doing is giving ammunition to people that didn't need any more ammunition to begin with. We have a responsibility to do things properly. And yet this is still the way that the general public perceive us. That production team sat down and picked this kid off an estate for a reason. He was the optic that they wanted. To have somebody who is eloquent and cerebral, like Francis, go on and, why are you asking me that question? Are you trying to catch me out? You just catch them straight away. Listen, mate, you're not quick enough, so you need to sharpen up. Like, I'm not falling into this trap. So, whereas obviously this other kid was just happy as proud as punch to be on TV, and you know, like, and just all excited and just basically spilled his guts, spouted a load of wrong information. One of the quotes was, "Monitor lizards have been known to kill their owners."
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, and he's got a white throat monitor that's like 4.5 foot long. It's like, really? Fuck. It boiled my piss. I cannot even begin to tell you how angry that program made me. And it's a real shame, because the hobby is so much more than that. And it wasn't my hobby. That doesn't represent my hobby. Not as far as I'm concerned.
Well, no, and I completely agree, and that is the image that people think of. The mainstreamers, people who are I shouldn't call them mainstreamers, people who don't keep reptiles. Yeah, that is what they think, and then to put that on TV, it only reinforces, like, yeah, you are the weird guy that has 45 snakes in a small room, and you know, I always say, like, we want to be stewards of the hobby and stewards of herpetoculture, so we can show the rest of the non-reptile keeping people why we do it and why it's important and what values we offer the society, even if you don't want to be a reptile keeper. You don't want to let random people outside your bubble figure out or come to their own conclusion why you keep 40 snakes in your house, because they're going to come to the conclusion that you're a weirdo, a creepy guy who has no teeth, who feeds rats to snakes all night. And we don't want that image.
Absolutely. We don't want that image. And you try as you might to remove that image, there's a hangover from the 80s and 90s, which still sees the hobby that way. And until we can get cerebral people in a position that can talk eloquently to people that are willing to listen about what it is our hobby does, we're not going to get anywhere. The truth is, though, that won't sell newsprint. It is not newsworthy. It is not engaging. It is not interesting. That's why you need a Joe Exotic. You can't have somebody who's just normal talking about animals they love and why you're passionate about improving their husbandry, because nobody in the general public gives a shit, because they need action and they need pizzazz and car chases and helicopters and rockets and all this shit, you know, and they need to be entertained. So maybe even trying to convince the general public is a waste of time. Why, you know, like, concentrate on what we're doing for ourselves. Look at the things that people highlight as being issues of our hobby and improve ourselves. The more that sort of joint community education rises, we close the loopholes of dickheads doing stuff like this kid on the estate, and it becomes the norm to have your UVB on all your animals. It becomes the norm to have thermostats on all your animals. That we're doing things a certain way and to a certain set of standards. In the UK, they introduced the animal activities license for shops. So this prescribes a certain size of vivarium and a certain size of animal that can be kept within it, but they can leave the shop and put it in a shoebox.
Right. Doesn't make sense.
So we're the guys with the transient stock. We're the guys that are only having things potentially for a short while, and we're the guys that have got to provide homes bigger potentially than they're going to get, because they could, if they're coming to us for the animal, they could tell me they've got an 8-foot viv take a photo of an 8-foot viv. At some point, you've got to trust them. And
Exactly.
but they're not forced to be telling me the truth. And this is our issue. So until standards are actually enforced for the hobby, it's all a bit farcical.
Yeah. Do you think we are moving fast enough as far as improving, like progressing, improving the image?
I'm impressed with the work that Advancing Herpetological Husbandry and other groups have undertaken. I'm impressed with the rate that information is disseminated and sent around other groups once it's been published to Reptile Lighting or AHH. There is always going to be the old schoolers who do not want to accept it, who will shoot it down. And thankfully, they're a dying breed, and we can soon be shut of them. They run most of the UK hobby. The sooner they're gone, the better. The dinosaurs, they need to go. I have no time for them whatsoever, and I don't hide my disdain for them. And I'm very publicly a detractor from them. I've got no time for them, and it holds us back. We've got people like Harvey Tweaks and the lads down at Celtic Reptile, and they're doing these outdoor enclosures, wanting to do the reintroductions. They had a positive piece of news put into a newspaper. Fabulous. Should have been fanfare everywhere. Wonderful. What a great news story. Positive about reintroductions, showing young reptile keepers that are positive and moving forward and full of energy and vibrancy about their challenges and what they want to do. Everything that we want our public image to be. Shared onto a group, and all the old schoolers shot them down about reintroductions. And you think, you pricks. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, exactly.
You've got a 19 and 20-year-old kid, or however, like 17, 18-year-old kids who are trying their best. They've got into the national press. It's been positive, and you're giving them shit.
Yeah.
What the f are you about? This hobby, unfortunately, does come with a lot of frustrations. A lot of frustrations. Yes, where the people that really you want to say to them, well done, Liam Sinclair at Reptiles and Research, another great channel. And these guys are pushing it forward. These are the young whippersnappers that are now catching me and Francis. And I mean, they're passing me because I'm not at the top of the ladder. One of the other analogies I use is, and sometimes the AHH is guilty of this. We climb the ladder of advancement, but then turn around and lift the ladder up.
Yes.
Nobody starts where they are now. If they want to look me straight in the eye and say, I've always kept this way. For 25 years, I've used multiple heating systems and thermostatic systems and off. You're lying. You're telling me a lie. So you started somewhere that was basic and you've ramped up. What we can't do on that journey of aspiration is climb a ladder, turn around and yank it up so that the others can't follow. What you then can't do is deride them, berate them and chastise them because they're not as advanced as you are. So I've almost willfully stayed halfway down the ladder to reach down and pick the first guys up and say, come on. Yeah. And then I'll hand over to Francis. Do you know what I mean?
Yes,
so it's
exactly.
like a tag team effort, like passing up to one another. And the idea being is that you're leveling up. So, I'll take them for the first 3 or 4 years. We'll get them the basics. We'll teach them all the just their fundamentals. And then the advancement stages you guys can take. That has to be the way it works. As soon as you remove the aspirational element, you kill the hobby dead.
Yes. That is what the hobby is to constantly aspire to do the next thing, to do the next more advanced thing. I always say the most fun you have in the hobby is when you are challenging yourself at a skill set that you haven't developed yet. So maybe you're learning how to do new lighting, you're learning how to place the probe properly. Yeah. And again, it kind of goes back to the belt system. Like if you're trying things that are way too advanced, you're going to start hating it. It's like trying why do video game levels progressively get harder? It's because you get better at the game. You can't start with level 10 because you're going to give up instantly and hate it. Absolutely. And it can't be level 1 forever because you'll get bored. Absolutely. There's no problems to solve. So there has to be that element of aspiration and problem solving, or else like you say, it just will disappear.
I agree completely.
So, one of the things you had mentioned back that we do have to, be honest about is we do keep animals in boxes. That's what we're doing. And I think that's exactly right. So do you have an answer for if someone says, why should you be allowed to keep animals? What is your reason for promoting this at all?
So if you were to ask me the first time one was taken from the wild, should it have been taken from the wild? My answer would be no. The horse has bolted.
Yeah.
There's captive bred animals everywhere that have been produced in captivity, raised in captivity, cultivated in captivity a lot of times to produce these new morphs and different things. They wouldn't succeed in the wild, and I don't have the heart to euthanize them all. So that's why.
Yeah.
You know, it's as simple as that, you know, and I believe that I can provide a good quality of life for an animal. I believe that by watching it grow and develop, its colors develop, that it's feeding, maybe its reproductive cycle, certain things that just prove to me that it's okay. It's hard to quantify. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a learned man in any form when it comes to this. I hold no qualifications in animal care or reptile keeping. It's all self-taught. But you know, it's one of those where I think that the hobby would not have succeeded, and we would have not had the sheer depth of species breeding successes that we have had unless we were doing a half decent job of replicating them. Yeah, I mean, some of them are going to breed for fun. Beardies will breed whether they're half dead or not, and that's part of the problem. Part of the issue is that beardies breed themselves to death. That's what girls do, and idiots keep pairs together for life. But then, if you think about common species that come into the hobby that we don't see anywhere enough of as far as reproduction goes, Berber skinks. So Eumachis snyderi or Novo Eumachis snyderi, whatever it is now. They're a fabulous lizard. They're my favorite lizards. And if I was to tell anybody what lizard to buy, it'd be a Berber skink over a leopard gecko, crested gecko. And screw all them. Berbers beat them hands down in my mind. I think they're awesome. But there may have been, maybe that I've heard of, 6 UK breedings of them. And then I've only ever known of one be reproduced after the first set and do 2 litters and then stopped completely and couldn't get them to do it third time. I only ever got eggs. I could never get the eggs to hatch, and I only ever got 1 set of eggs. That was back when I was about 16. But and back then at 16, there was only 2 recorded breedings in the entirety of Europe. Yet Berber skinks are imported en masse, and this is a shame because realistically, if we could crack that nut, that is a superb lizard to keep. They're absolutely fabulous. And that's a hard nut to crack. It hasn't happened, but there's other species where we're getting these successes. The Berber skinks, even though they're not popular, 5 or 6 successful breedings is more than the 1 or 2 in the whole of Europe. So we're moving somewhere. People are beginning to put these little jigsaws together and work out which parts are missing. What do I need to do? Which part of the thermal gradient am I dropping at winter? When is it raising back up in spring? Is there a wet season? Do I need to consider a slight basking area, or is it completely cold? Do I need to think about how much of their circadian rhythm needs to change for them to be able to breed? You're modulating humidity. These are all questions. People that keep stuff like green trees, they're difficult to breed. Yeah, I suppose they are. But as soon as you get a decent thunderstorm, open all your windows, chuck your snakes together, and they're shagging because it's that humidity trigger and that barometric pressure that gets them going. But some of the other stuff, maybe some of the more temperate things, they're more difficult and nuanced to get cracking, and that can be a problem.
Yeah, it becomes the ultimate problem to solve, and I think that the hobby does that brilliantly for a lot of species. So you can imagine that maybe in 4 or 5 years that will be more of a common species available.
Absolutely, I hope so.
Where do you sit on morphs? Because I think you have, being a shop owner, it's an interesting topic. You'll probably have a different perspective than many people because you might see people get drawn into reptiles because of them. I don't know. Where do you sit on them in general?
In general, I don't like them.
You don't like them?
No. I started the YouTube channel on the strength of how much I disliked the way that royals and corns had taken over. So when I grew up and doing the reptiles in the 1990s, I could walk into a reptile shop and see grey, Texas, black, yellow, Everglades, Florida, Cali, speckled, desert, grey banded, San Luis Potosi, Nuevo Leon, Durango. The list goes on. And they were commonplace snakes. They were Mexican blacks were 25 quid. So what?
Yeah.
$35. Do you know what I mean? Nothing. Yeah. They were everybody bred them. They were a piece of piss to breed, and they were and I had all that stuff, and then I stopped and thought to myself one day, because we couldn't get anything, and we just had a load of corns and royals coming. Well, this is crap. I can't get excited about this from a personal perspective. If it was a kid I'm selling it to, then of course I'm going to be stoked, as you would imagine. That's my job. But from a personal perspective, no, it's not lighting my fire. So I started the YouTube channel on the basis that I wanted to promote a greater level of diversity and try and encourage some sort of colubrid renaissance where we can start getting it. And in actual fact, it's happened, but not because of me, because in the UK, everyone's realized if they want to sell to Europe or trade with Europe, they need stuff that's off the CITES registered. So now they all want colubrids, and now like Mexican blacks are 300 quid each or something stupid. Do you know what I mean? So well, for 5 minutes till everybody works out how to breed them, and then they'll be 25 quid again. Do you know? That's the way this hobby works. It's mad.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. The podcast that I released last week, that was one of the things that I had said is I just don't buy that everybody is that into ball pythons. I just don't. It's a cool species. It's interesting. I mean, I don't keep them. I probably wouldn't keep a ball python just because I'm not super interested in them. But I just don't believe that every single person is that obsessed with a single species, and that's where we talk about that overproduction issue.
Yeah, I think the bubbles popped. The bubbles popped, and the problem is whether it was ball pythons, whether it was boa constrictors, whether it's hognoses, whether it's corn snakes. A lot of the breeders are transient. They espouse that they are absolutely, I love my retics. I'd never breed anything else. You won't breed anything else until something more lucrative comes along, and then you're going to breed that, and then all your retics will get binned, and then you'll buy something else. And this is, you've watched it. The guys in the 90s who I saw growing up were breeding rare tricolor snakes like milks and the mountain kings, and they were cool, and they had a really wide range. Then it went to boas, and then it went to retics, and you think to yourself, you're a douchebag. Do you know what I mean? Like, you're not loyal. This isn't about love. This isn't about your passion. This is about money.
Yeah,
and the fact that you would sit and try and say that it's about love is difficult. I openly admit I'm business. I'm selling reptiles. I try and sell reptiles oh God, get my teeth in an ethical way as possible.
Yeah.
But those ethics will still jar with the general public and cause problems. And I understand that. And I own it, and it is what it is. I'm a big boy. If you don't like it, tell me, and I'll shrug my shoulders and carry on with my day. It's not going to hurt me. But the people that would say, I know, but this is my passion. I absolutely love it. And then 5 years later, that passion has changed to a completely different species, completely different size. Funnily enough, also worth lots of money. And just so happens that the previous species that you were breeding, the bubbles popped on that, and we don't want to breed them anymore. And the bubble popped on the species before that. And these guys hop around, and they're all they are is hummingbirds. They're just flying to the biggest flower. That's what they do.
Yeah, and it's concerning when you realize, something like a ball python or even a boa, these are animals that are going to live 25, 30, 40 years, and every litter, like I always try to do the math for people. When you have, 8 baby ball pythons, that is 320 years worth of ball python. That's what you've just created. So it's, how much responsibility do you want to have with that? And I imagine if you're producing several clutches, how many years of animals did you just create? And it's a good exercise for people to go through. And boas are even worse. You might get like a 25, 30 like litter baby. Worse. And retics are even worse. Yeah. So there's some unethicalness about that.
Oh, absolutely. When you're talking about a yield of 60 or 80 eggs, how do you ethically argue your way out of that bag?
Yeah.
You can't do it. There is no ethical argument for producing just a single litter of 80. Say you then send out these animals to 40 breeders. They each have a pair, and in 4 years' time, they all produce from them. Yeah. Now they're a smaller adult. They might not produce as much because they've not had the time to mature, but they could still easily produce 40 eggs a piece. So you've got 20 girls each producing 40 eggs, and in 4 years' time, what happens then? This is the issue. Then you've got the genetic collateral damage, where you get stuff that's being produced that is the low end shit that the breeder doesn't want because it isn't a cow pie that's worth God knows how much. So these are your throwaway ones. These are the ones that end up in the hands of people that couldn't give a shit. They just want a big snake because it's cool, and that's they're our problem people. I suppose at least the breeders that are spending the big money at least see some form of investment, or it is an investment, and that protects them in some way. But the collateral damage or lower end animals, that's where my concern lies.
So what about with young kids? Are kids attracted to the morph, leopard gecko morphs, ball python morphs, or do you find a lot of kids are just coming into the shop because they're obsessed with reptiles? So how does the kid
they're just obsessed with reptiles. The problem is that usually they've been influenced by YouTube.
Right.
So they've watched an over giddy American presenter who's had far too many packets of Skittles pre-production go on and be overexcited about this super duper, whatever it is, and that's your problem. That they're coming in sort of parrot fashion. I watched this episode of so and so, and he had this, and it was awesome. Right, okay, but a normal leopard gecko is a beautiful gecko, darling, and it's the price of the one that you've just asked for. Oh no! So on occasion that happens, but for the most part with the kids, we're trying to sell them the low end stuff anyway because we don't want to break the bank. Why take the Mickey? I don't need to take the piss with them. They're buying animals anyway. They're here. They're a captive audience. It isn't necessarily about me trying to sell them the most expensive leopard gecko. It's about me selling them a healthy leopard gecko. That means that they'll be back in every week for 2 tubs of live feeds. That they'll be in every 6 weeks for fresh bags of substrate and bottles of disinfectant. That's your long-term goal. That's not the animal. It's retaining their business by realizing actually that he's not trying to screw me. He's not trying to have me around the corner. He's trying to be fair. We do the high-end ones. I'm looking at a gecko now that's £900, Black Knight Super Snow. It's a leopard gecko.
That is crazy.
I mean, it doesn't make sense to me. It's worth what someone's willing to pay for it. And I mean, I know these Black Knights are big money, but for me, it's just a leopard gecko. So.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's definitely an interesting topic for sure. So I think we'll wrap up with your YouTube channel, because that's what I wanted to kind of finish up on. And you kind of already mentioned why you started it, kind of along with the morphs. Maybe you could just let everybody know what is on the channel, because you have some excellent videos on there, kind of a wide range of things.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a few series. The main ones are there's the introducing series, which is for beginners. So that would be anything that we would deem to fall into the parameters of being able to be kept by novice keepers with absolutely no knowledge. And there's a far wider range of species available to be kept by the beginner than the beginner realizes. And that's the chief principle of the YouTube channel, to make them realize it doesn't start and stop with corn and ball pythons. We can go to their cousins, the Great Plains rat snake. We could look at, if you still believe in them, rosy rat snakes. You could look at fox snakes. You could look at Baird's rat snakes. You could look at Trans-Pecos rat snakes. You could look at any of the American rats, whether that be, I know it's Western, Central, and Eastern, which is a load of shit, Dylan. I hate it. They're black, yellow, Texas grey, and Everglades, and they always will be, because that's what the hobby's bred for 40 years. But they are all beginner species. Any of the North American Getula kings, any of the Pyromilana kings, any of the Mexicana kings, Alterna, the grey bandits. You've got your Western hognose. You've got, such as in Europe, you've got the leopard snakes, viperine water snakes, grass snakes, a whole abundance of species that are hardy, because by essence they're usually temperate, which means that they're a tougher species and they'll put up with a bigger kicking, and which means that then we can take slightly more liberties and they'll forgive us for our foibles and errors without dropping off the perch and dying like an or a green tree run. So it was the main job was making them realize. Then I realized, right, okay, so that deals with the beginners, but a lot of people do aspire, so I need to start thinking about intermediate and advanced species as well, and graded them appropriately.
So what sort of factors are you using? You kind of touched on a few, but what factors do you use to categorize a species? Like what puts it into a beginner, intermediate, or advanced category?
So advanced would generally, it would be a giant.
Okay.
So it's precluded from because of size. And whilst the husbandry isn't per se necessarily advanced, the infrastructure required to be able to keep it properly is.
Right.
So, or the financial constraints of keeping one is. Intermediate would be usually temperament or size based. So arbitrary size limit for introducing is about 2.4 meters, so 8 feet. Everything has to be under 8 feet. As soon as it's over 8 feet, it goes in, it just immediately falls into intermediate. They are arbitrary. It's just my system of being able to organize the way that this works. You know, boa constrictor on paper is a beginner snake because it is a fabulous animal. Yeah. One of the singular most tame snakes going. But if I get Mandy for her 11th birthday wanting a boa constrictor, she will be told no, because this could be a 3-meter snake. Yeah. And it's too much. It's too big. It's too strong. It's not appropriate, you know, and that's from a safety. And I know, having been bit by hundreds of boas, I know that Mandy would really appreciate me not selling her a boa that potentially could get her and cause her problems. I mean, more than likely she never would get bit. They're wonderful, but the risk is still there. And I've got to be conscious of that. And being somebody who sells to the public, I've got to protect the public from themselves quite a lot of the time, because what they think they want and what they actually want are two very different things. And I have to say to them, no, you really don't want that. You don't want that. You know, that's a bad idea. We did it. What else did we do on there? We did Chaz's no BS reptile advice, which was a bit fruity, and no filter was applied, and that was, I think it got changed to snakes and adders reptile advice, but that was people writing in with questions, and I would take the time to do maybe a 10, 15, 20-minute answer, talking about any number of things, whether that was brumation, cohabitation, whatever it might be, an obstacle that faced them in their personal path, or they were wanting to make a decision about what animal should I consider out of these three that I've narrowed it down to, and I would go through the pluses and minuses. And then I did a stress series, which probably is what I was most proud of, because that's something that people just don't factor into their care, working on stresses and understanding what stresses are, whether that be stresses within the vivarium, external to the vivarium. The fact that me and you as keepers are a stressor, and people fail to realize that they have an action of stress upon the animals that they keep. So, you know, our interactions with the animals affect them as much as the temperatures, humidity, size of the vivarium, being able to hide, being in high traffic areas with kids running past, or playing football in the dining room, or whatever it might be. You've got to look at these things, and am I considering all the possible stressors that could be affecting my captive? We're in the northern hemisphere. Is it in a south-facing room where for 5 hours of the day the sun tracks over and makes the tank excessively hot? The stat can't do anything about it. It's turned off. But it's the greenhouse effect. Your tank is overheating. That's an environmental stressor external to the vivarium. But have we considered it? You know, and these are the things that people need to think about. It's a different way of thinking. Yeah. You're problem solving, and you're thinking about, well, have I considered these parameters? Have I considered this? Does this have a discernible effect on the quality of life of my animal? And can I change it to make it less of an issue?
Is that just a single video, or was that a series of?
I think there's five
videos.
Yeah, it's just called the stress series. So, and it's just me chatting about stress, but it goes through all sorts of stuff. So,
well, and it seems like you really plan out your videos. I mean, the ones you did, that great one on ball pythons that I think a lot of people shared around last year, where you're just kind of going through the climate and their what's the word? Not estivation. Just the ecology in general. Yeah. And, you know, migration, that's what I was thinking. That's what I was thinking, you know, how they move around. So that was a great one. But you have all these charts printed out, and, you know, you spend a lot of time putting these videos together. I started
spending more and more time. The problem is I've created a beast that I can't control. And that's your issue now.
Now people are going to expect that.
Yeah. So the previous iterations of my videos, if you watch the very first introducing series, they're god awful. I'm sat in the dining room. I'm just talking to the camera. I mean, they weren't scripted. I just riffed about whatever species I was supposed to talk about. And then over time, I played around with the model and the way that it worked. So I was always interested in taxonomy. and the herpetologists that named them. And if they were like, when people have given honorary names and whatever else, this stuff interested me, the history, you know, whether it was Pope or Dumeril and Bibron, or whether it was whoever else who named X, Y, and Z at what date, or Linnaeus or whoever. So I started introducing that, and then people started putting flipping comments about skip to 7 minutes 22, because that's when the care advice starts. And I thought, all right, fair enough. Right. You know, rather than pout about it, I just took it on board and thought, yeah, fair dues. All right, maybe I'm geeking a bit too much. Maybe I need to step off the geek pedal and just go back to info or whatever. So the model that we've got now, which is, like you said, with the royals, corns, the red milk, red blood python, the most recent ones, I go to a website called timeanddate.com. And if you go to timeanddate.com, you can select the climate data for thousands of different regions. What I hasten to say, and plenty of people pull me about this, and this is macro climate data, not microclimate data. So you can't take the data taken from Time and Date and infer that this is the way that we should keep the animals. What it shows us, though, is climatologically, how does it modulate throughout the year? Daytime high, nighttime low, rainfall. These are key factors for tracking the way that we keep our animals. So I present those 3 data points across a year, as well as, if I can find it, or I generate and make it, a distribution map, such as with the royals. People don't quite appreciate just how big a range royal pythons have got. Far wider than the US, far wider. I think it's about another 1,200 miles out to sea once the US ends. That's how far the royal pythons are spread across Africa. It's unbelievable. I think from Senegal right through to the Democratic Republic of Congo. So even Uganda, I think part of their range might be. I can't remember. I might be mixing that up with Toxicodrias. They've got a similar range, the Blandings tree snakes. I found it really interesting, and the fact that it would take 8 hours to fly across their natural range, and you think
it's amazing.
Oh, shit, that's a successful species. For a dumpy python that lives inside a termite mound all its life, he's done pretty well, guys. He's managed to spread 8,000 miles across the African continent underground in a termite mound. What a clever snake.
Yeah, exactly.
Tub lords.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, and that's what that video is so perfect for. It sort of dismantles that. Like, hey, there could be a time in the year when a burrow type situation makes sense, but it's not 12 months of the year.
Absolutely. You only have to look at the climate data. It doesn't marry up with what they're saying. So, you know, you've got a period from, I think it runs from December to maybe April, May, that Senegal has on average 0 rainfall. So it is completely barren. Yet this is in the tropical rainforest belt of West Africa. Yet it goes through a complete starvation of rainwater for 5 months. The ground's completely parched, cracked, and rock solid. There's nothing to be eaten, nothing to be found. What's the point in being active? You run the risk of immediately dehydrating and dying the minute you put your head above ground. Plus, every predator worth its salt will be on you like you don't know what, because you haven't got any grass cover or tree cover on the grasslands and plains surrounding the rainforest, which is where the royals mainly come from, and the borderlands of the forest. So at which point they've hidden and estivated to conserve energy. That to come above ground wastes more energy than they can take back on board. So they've done a cost benefit analysis, and the cost benefit analysis has said, I'm going to stay underground and I'm just going to wait this shit out because it's harsh out there. Then the rains come, the grasses grow, the flies arrive, the mammals start breeding, the prey items are there. Then the pythons come out. They feed, they reproduce, they gestate, they lay eggs, and we start the cycle over again. This is the way that the year works. And it's an argument of convenience for people who have no argument. There is no argument. There is no argument. You know, you're just because you do it and all your mates do it, and he's really successful and produced a load of stuff and made X amount of thousands of dollars last year, doesn't make you fucking right. It just makes you a dick. Do you know, like it just means you've made money. There's no commentary about the quality of care you're offering. I hasten to add, as a shop, we use racks,
Mm-hmm.
but our stock is transient. The whole point being is that if we've got a bunch of babies, they're in racking systems so that we can separately care for them, stop the transmission of disease. But then they're going to go into a onward home, and it's invariably a vivarium. We do everything in our power now. When we sell the royal pythons, they go in a 3-foot vivarium, ceramic bulb, day-night thermostat, and they're given the option of the shade dweller UV. I'd say probably we're at about 20 to 25% acceptance on snake UV at this moment with new sales. Old sales, it was 0. So we're progressing. Probably not as fast as the advancing lobby would like us to, but again, we're a shop and our model is different. So we're not going to be able to do it at the speed that you dudes do it. And if we said straight out the back, every snake's got UV, come hell or high water, the risk is we chop our profits in half. We've got to do this slowly and do it right so that the shop can be sustained and we can introduce the changes that we want long term to introduce. And until I've got UV in every one of my snake vivs, I'm hard pressed to insist on anything.
Yeah. And like you said, it's not a small change. So you got just like someone who has a big collection, if they decide they want to go UV, you're probably not going to do that over a weekend. You're probably going to take the whole year to buy a couple of bulbs at a time. And the other videos that I really like that I'll point people towards is you did a great one on snake anatomy. So you kind of go through different scalation and whatnot. And then you break down a bunch of the Latin terms, which is super helpful for people. I am horrible with Latin terms or Latin names. And even reading them, I have no clue what I'm reading. It just, in my head, it's way off. So I always come to your videos, whether it's just to hear you say the Latin name and then I go off and do whatever I'm doing because you pronounce them, at least, I don't know, I assume they're right or they're close to being right. Or you're shaking your head.
Just say it with confidence, dude. Whatever comes out, boom, that's it. I'm owning it. Even if it's wrong, I'm owning it anyway. They've not spoken it for 2,000 years. They get away with it. It's no
Okay, that is good advice then. Just, the language is dead. Just make it up as you go.
Make it up and just go for it. Just hit the pedal.
But the video where you break down the Latin names is super helpful for people because it just shows you how the suffixes and prefixes actually mean something. It can actually help you determine what you're looking at, which is really helpful.
Absolutely. I mean, people don't realize that just simple names, leucomelas, black and white. So that the reason for that is so Dendrobates leucomelas, the bumblebee dart frog, was preserved, and it was a preserved specimen that was named. And because the preservation process had bleached it, it had turned it white. So it should have been, I don't know, Flavi Milano or what are the other ones? Flavi nigritus or something like that. And that would have been made more sense for black and yellow for the bumblebee. But because it was bleached specimen, it was white and black. So it was called leucomelas.
Oh, that's so cool.
That's just a stupid history example. But you've got like dendrophila. So to phila is to love. Dendros is a tree, or dendron is a tree. So boiga dendrophila, boiga tree lover. It's they're telling you what they want and how they want it. Melanocephalus, black head. So if the cephalum is the brain or the head, and then Milano is black, same as nigritus or nigra. So there's a bunch of different ones, but things that you wouldn't think as well. So Tamnos means bush, but Tamnophis is a garter snake, and you consider a garter snake a water snake, but it's actually a bush snake. Tamnos is bush, Uphis is snake, Tamnophis it's a bush snake.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, it's amazing.
That's literally what the Latin name is telling you. People call them the gopher snakes. They're not gopher snakes. Pituo or pitu is pine. Ophis is snake. Pituophis, it's the pine snake family, not the gopher snake family. So, this is where I get my little uppity self all excited because it's like the Latin name's telling you what it is. It's not a gopher snake because it'd be Catenefer.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing. And I know, the video that you do breaks down all that for people that are listening and want to hear more about that. So anyway, Chaz, thank you so much for jumping on an episode. I really, really appreciate this. I think it's great to hear the perspective of a shopkeeper, and I think everybody really loves what you're up to, both on YouTube as well as how you run your shop, and the morals and principles that guide you are something that I think align with many of the listeners. So can you let everybody know where they can find more info on you online?
Yes, so you can visit our website, which is www.snakesandadders.co.uk. You can find us on Facebook at Snakes and Adders. We're also on Instagram at chaz.snakesanadders. And Pixie has just set up a TikTok for maybe younger people and fans. I don't understand it all. I'm just letting her rock and roll with it, man. So, like,
is that Snakes and Adders as well?
Pardon?
Is it Snakes and Adders as well on TikTok?
Yeah. Snakes and Adders Sheffield, I think it is on
okay.
TikTok. So.
I'll find it. I'll put it in the show notes for the younger audience that wants to watch that. So anyway, Chaz, thank you so much. This was an absolute pleasure.
Thank you very much indeed for having me.
All right, that is the end of that episode. Chaz, thank you so much for stopping by. I had a blast chatting with you. I especially enjoyed listening to you talk about how you interact with your younger customers. I think that is really the way that a store has to be run. And I hope that there are other store listeners or store owners out there listening to this, or store employees, that you take some of what Chaz said and try to implement that in your own store. We want the next generation of kids to have that foundation, be excited about the animal, understand how to care for it. Make them understand that it is their responsibility to make sure the animal is well cared for and make sure the animal's care is advancing. And just imagine if the next generation coming up under us is that type of keeper. That would be amazing. Listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed it. If you enjoyed the episode, make sure you share it on Facebook or Instagram. Let's get this episode out on as many ears as possible. If you are interested in supporting the show a little bit more, you can join us at Patreon over at patreon.com/animalsathome. Or feel free to check out the show's sponsor, CustomReptileHabitats.com. There's an affiliate link in both the YouTube description as well as the show notes. If you are looking for something new as far as reptile equipment goes, definitely go check them out. A small commission will come back to me at no extra cost to you if you do make a purchase, which of course helps me produce the show. All right, well, I hope everybody has a good week. I will talk to you next Sunday.